See on the board, on the screen, today's message is, did you miss God's call? We're taking it from Samuel, who had to be called 3 times, before he realized what it was. So the important thing is, did you miss God's call? And maybe the more important thing is, are you going to miss his call this year? I mean, last year's over with. If you missed it, you missed it. But you're going to be ready this year to listen to his call. And in order to hear his call, you have to believe that God still talks to people. He still sends a message to us. We don't know how it's going to come. We don't know that it's going to come directly from him. And if we look through the Bible, we can see in different times, here in Samuel, it says that God spoke to him. When Moses was being spoken to by God, there was a burning bush. And I'm sure if we saw a burning bush that was just burning and didn't go out and didn't burn all up, we probably would go pay attention to and see what was going on. So that's what it took probably to get Moses to listen to him. We don't want to be like Paul when he was Saul. Before he became a Christian, he got knocked to the ground and was blind for 3 days. That would really get your attention. And we can look on through it in the New Testament of when God spoke. When Mary found out that she was going to be the mother of Jesus, an angel came to her and spoke. When Joseph was given the message, he was asleep when an angel spoke to him. So we don't have to be awake to hear God speak. And if you read through the Bible, you can see that God spoke to Joseph 3 different times in a dream. The first time was when he told him about Mary and that he should take her. The second time was when he told Joseph to take Mary and the child and flee to Egypt. And then the third time is when he told Joseph that it was safe to come back. And if we want to look on through, and it seemed to be a lot of it was right with the Christmas story, if we think of the shepherds or the wise men, we feel that most of the time you think of there being 3 wise men. There could have been more, but you associate 3 because it was 3 gifts. But when they came to see the baby Jesus, after they saw him and got ready to go back home, you can read in the Bible where they, in a dream, realized they should not go back the same way. So this must mean that at least 3 people had the same dream, the same time, and all agreed that they ought to go back in a different direction. So there were different ways that it happened, but today we're going to talk about Samuel. In order to talk about Samuel, we need a little background on Samuel. Samuel's mother was Hannah. Samuel's father, I'm not going to bother with his name. It's one of those that's hard to pronounce. But he had 2 wives. But Samuel's mother was Hannah. And what had happened is when his father had 2 wives, the one wife had quite a few children. And back in those days, children was very important. Family was important. And when you had a child, you figured God blessed you. So the more children you had, the more you felt that God was blessing you. Hannah had no children. She felt bad about it. Once a year, Samuel's parents traveled to go and work gifts and praise God. And they went to the temple. When they went, Hannah's story, her prayer was always that she wished God would help her to have a child. And so the one day when she prayed, she prayed to God and told him if he would just give her a child, and it would be a boy child, she would present the son back to God, and God could raise him as he wanted to. So this is how Samuel got to be in the temple. And the priest at that time was Eli. Eli had his own family. He had 2 sons that were going to be priests, but the 2 sons were using the priesthood to better themselves. They were stealing things that were being brought and offered at the temple. They were also chasing after the women that came to the temple. Eli was told about this by God, and even though Eli was a priest and everybody respected him as a priest, he wasn't taking care of his own family. He did not discipline his sons for doing this. So this is where we get into today's lesson. And it says, the boy Samuel ministered before the Lord under Eli, or he was living there at the temple under Eli. One night, Eli, whose eyes were becoming so weak that he could barely see, was lying down in the usual place. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, or they had not yet closed up the temple for the night. And this is when Eli hears a voice. Now, Samuel hears a voice. Samuel's job at that time, he was just a young boy, his job was to open up the temple in the morning, close the gates and the doors at night. He also had to sweep out the temple and take care of dusting off everything, keeping it clean. So he was more or less a janitor, but yet he was learning to become a priest. He was following after the priests and learning about the priesthood. But he still didn't know. He knew God, but he never spoke to God, and he never knew that God would speak to him. So this is why when he heard the voice, he figured it was Eli. Eli was very old and gone blind. So when he heard being called, he went to him. And Eli said, I didn't call you. Go back to sleep. So he went back and laid down. And of course, this happens 3 times. On the 3rd time, Eli realized that it must have been the Lord calling him. So he told Samuel to say, yes, Lord, what is it you want? Now, if we were getting a message from God, I think we would really be interested in getting that message, because if we got a message, it must be something good, something great that's going to be happening. But if you read the rest on farther into Samuel, you'll find out that that wasn't the message that God gave Samuel. It wasn't a good message. He told Samuel all the problems that Eli was doing, all the problems that Eli's sons were doing, and God said, I've already spoken to Eli. He's done nothing about it. So now he is no longer going to be a priest, and no longer is any member in his family going to be in the priesthood. In fact, they're all going to be kicked out of the church. I'm going to have nothing to do with them, because I've talked to him, and he did nothing about it. Now, can you imagine being a young boy and you get this message? And the first thing when you get up in the morning, Eli says to Samuel, what did God have to say? Now here's this little boy. He tried to ignore him all day, and he couldn't. I mean, finally Eli caught up to him and said, what did he say? Well, Samuel didn't want to say anything. I mean, how do you tell the priest, you're not doing anything right. You're going to be thrown out of the church. You're going to be excommunicated from it. Your family, your sons are going to die, all because of what you were doing wrong. So Eli tried to ignore it, or Samuel, and Eli told him, he said, I want to know the truth, and if you don't tell me the truth, God will punish you for lying to me. So Samuel had no choice but to tell him what God had to say. So if you read the upper room this morning, you'll find that it talked about there's always jobs for older people. And I think it was kind of fitting with Dawn being up here and me being up here. I mean, it shows that older people can do something. We found something in the paper the other day. In case you feel that you aren't worthy of God speaking to you, or God has nothing for you to do, or you just think you aren't worthy of it, I want to read a few things about some people in the Bible. Noah, we think of him being a great person. You realize that Noah was a grump? Abraham was too old. I mean, when he started, everybody thought he was too old. Isaiah was a daydreamer. Jacob was a liar. Leah was ugly. Joseph was abused. Moses had a stuttering problem. Gideon was afraid. Samson had long hair and was a womanizer. Rahab was a prostitute. Jeremiah and Timothy were too young. David had an affair and was a murderer. Elijah was suicidal. Jonah ran from God. Naomi was a widow. Job went bankrupt. Peter denied Christ. The disciples fell asleep while praying. Martha worried about everything. The Samaritan woman was divorced. Zacharias was too small. Paul was too religious. Timothy had an ulcer, and Lazarus was dead. And that they were all used by God. So there's no excuse of anybody saying that God can't use you for something. Now, with today being Laity Sunday, does anybody else have anything they would like to bring out? We're all laities in the church, and anybody can participate.